Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Barth. I'm the director of the Clinton Presidential Library, and on behalf of everyone at the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service, and the Clinton Presidential Library, we are thrilled that you are here for this Clinton Presidential Center Presents event. And I'm thrilled to have a few minutes to talk about our new exhibition, Be Our Guest, that opens today and will run through May 27th of next year. Be Our Guest takes visitors on an exploration of the geopolitical considerations and behind-the-scenes planning that were integral to producing some of the most iconic state and official visits during the Clinton administration. Thus, Be Our Guest is about the interplay of diplomacy and pageantry. Be Our Guest invites visitors to experience these consequential moments through a rich archive of textual and audiovisual materials, one-of-a-kind gifts given to the Clintons by world leaders, fine china selected for table settings, and much, much more. The exhibit also includes a collection of original gowns and suits worn by President and Secretary Clinton to White House dinners. A series of videos produced for the event, and that includes some of the faces that you're going to hear from this evening, features firsthand accounts from President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and some of these key staff members. It brings these archival materials to life. Because entertainment is so often so central to these events, the exhibit also includes a compilation of musical performances from White House state dinners, including Earth, Wind & Fire, Whitney Houston, Lou Reed, and Liza Minnelli. Projects like this exhibition can only happen when teams come together in a collaborative spirit. And this was a partnership between the teams of the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum and the Clinton Foundation. And I want to thank those folks specifically who are part of putting this great exhibition together. First, on the foundation side, in addition to the foundation's entire facilities and operations team led by Debbie Schock, I want to single out Archivist Shanna Weathersby, along with Ben Thielmeyer, the Senior Manager of Communications and Marketing, and Joyce Cuban, the Director of Programming and Exhibitions, and of course, Executive Director Stephanie Streett. And on my team side, for the library and museum, in the lead was Supervisory Curator Stephanie Sims, and Stephanie's artistry is very much on show in this exhibition. While the rest of the museum was at the core of the work, we intentionally made this much more of a collaborative endeavor with our staff, archivists led by Supervisory Archivist Dana Simmons, including 8 audiovisual archivists and museum team members working together to pull together the right documents, the right artifacts, and the right photographs for each of the 14 visits featured in this exhibition. The vast majority of our staff members, you can see on the screen, were involved in this project. I would love it if everybody who was involved in putting this together from either the foundation side or the museum side to please stand up so we can acknowledge your participation. Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you all so much. And during the run of Be Our Guest, we look forward to a series of additional public programs like tonight's that think more deeply about these key diplomatic visits and how state events have changed across time. To stay up to date on our public program schedule, please go to clintonpresidentialcenter.com/events. And also, it's important to know that we have a rich array of educational programs scheduled for the spring that link to this exhibition. First, as you walk through the exhibit space, you'll see a great many maps. That's because we are centering much of our educational program for younger students around geography, both the political geography of nations' locations and boundaries, but also the physical and cultural geography of countries as we look at the key gifts that were given to President Clinton, and we think about their meaning, and we get young people to think about what gifts they would give if they were giving a gift on behalf of our country to other nations. Second, our high school programming will center around diplomacy, its history, and its ongoing importance in making our world a safer place. I'd now like to introduce via video the man who is at the center of the 14 diplomatic visits featured in Be Our Guest. President Clinton's schedule has changed and he is unable to join us this evening. He has, however, recorded this video message for you this evening. Please turn your attention to the screens, and thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight for the opening of Be Our Guest. I want to thank in advance our panelists, without whose work in the White House when I was president, this exhibit wouldn't be possible. Ambassador Capricia Marshall, Ambassador Nancy Soderberg, and Sharon. And I want to thank Stephanie Streett, Jay Barth, Vicky DeFrancesco Soto, and all the staff who've made tonight's program and the extraordinary new exhibit possible. Hosting foreign heads of state is one of the most useful tools in the diplomatic toolbox. And we made good use of it when I was president. You can use it to achieve any number of objectives, from shoring up longstanding strategic partnerships, to building relationships with new leaders, to highlighting countries you believe will be important to the future. Let me give you a few examples. My very first meeting with a foreign leader, about 2 weeks after I took office, was with Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada. Why? Because our neighbor to the north is one of our closest allies. It was important to affirm the relationship and lay the groundwork for cooperation on any number of areas, from NAFTA to regional and global security. And indeed, our countries would go on to work very closely together in the 8 years I served. 10 years ago last week, our world lost one of its great visionaries, my friend Nelson Mandela. I'll never forget the wonderful state dinner we hosted for him in October of 1994. We wanted to achieve several objectives. First, Mandela had inspired the world with his long quest for freedom and justice, and with his amazing approach to reconciliation, including putting the leaders of the parties who put him in jail in his cabinet. We wanted to honor that. We also wanted to signal that a post-apartheid South Africa.
So we celebrate you all for being here this evening. And a key reason that the Clinton Presidential Center exists is to promote conversations about our toughest issues. We hope you all will allow our panelists to share their views this evening. Following this event, the leadership of the Clinton Presidential Center has already expressed its willingness to sit down and visit with many about their concerns. Thank y'all and have a wonderful evening.
Mic on. Just so you all know, President Clinton really wanted to be with you. His college roommate is on his deathbed, and so he had to leave early so he could hopefully see his friend. He is in very grave condition. So that is why President Clinton had to leave early, but he wanted me to share this with you, and that's why he sent the video message. And in just a moment, we will play the video again so you all can hear his words. We respect everyone's differences here, but we would like to allow the people that showed up tonight to hear the program have the opportunity to do so. And I agreed prior to this program to meet peacefully with whoever wanted to meet to discuss this subject, and I will still be happy to do that. But as we are going to be respectful of you and your rights, we hope you will be respectful of our program this evening and the opportunity to share the magnificent history and the stories behind these state and official visits with our guest here. So I would like to see if we could show the video again. And I would please implore respect and let us continue our program. And as I said beforehand, I would be very happy to meet with whoever would like to after this program to have a discussion. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight for the opening of Be Our Guest. I want to thank in advance our panelists, without whose work in the White House when I was president, this exhibit wouldn't be possible. Ambassador Capricia Marshall, Ambassador Nancy Soderberg, and Sharon. And I want to thank Stephanie Streett, Jay Barth, Vicky DeFrancesco Soto, and all the staff who've made tonight's program and the extraordinary new exhibit possible. Hosting foreign heads of state is one of the most useful tools in the diplomatic toolbox. And we made good use of it when I was president. You can use it to achieve any number of objectives, from shoring up longstanding strategic partnerships, to building relationships with new leaders, to highlighting countries you believe will be important to the future. Let me give you a few examples. My very first meeting with a foreign leader, about 2 weeks after I took office, was with Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada. Why? Because our neighbor to the north is one of our closest allies. It was important to affirm the relationship and lay the groundwork for cooperation on any number of areas, from NAFTA to regional and global security. And indeed, our countries would go on to work very closely together in the 8 years I served. 10 years ago last week.
Would you please allow us to listen to the video from the president?
Ten years ago last week, our world lost one of its great visionaries, my friend Nelson Mandela. I'll never forget the wonderful state dinner we hosted for him in October of 1994. We wanted to achieve several objectives. First, Mandela had inspired the world with his long quest for freedom and justice, and with his amazing approach to reconciliation, including putting the leaders of the parties who put him in jail in his cabinet. We wanted to honor that. We also wanted to signal that a post-apartheid South Africa and Africa more broadly were very important to the United States and our vision of the global future. And finally, we had real business to take care of. For example, how would we handle and how would they handle South Africa's nuclear program? The state dinner turned out to be one of the most memorable, in no small part because of Whitney Houston's wonderful performance at Mandela's request. Above all, visits from foreign heads of state were an opportunity to connect across divides and celebrate our common humanity. From the decor to the food to the entertainment to the exchange of gifts, we were so often able to build bridges across cultures and lift up what we have in common. In the end, that's what diplomacy is all about. No one knows more about the hard work that goes into planning a state visit than our panelists and moderator. So I'm very excited now to introduce Ambassador Capricia Marshall, Ambassador Nancy Soderberg, Sharon Farmer, who recorded it all on film, and Stephanie Streett.
I want to thank President Clinton for his introduction, and we're just going to jump right into the program here. As President Clinton mentioned, we all had the rare privilege of serving in the Clinton administration. I think all of us on the panel were here from the first day to the last day for the entire 8 years, including Nancy, who I don't see on the panel yet, but I think they're having some technical difficulties, but she hopefully will be coming on. So we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the behind the scenes. We're going to tell some stories. This is going to be a fun and lively conversation. And as President Clinton said, the purpose of these state visits was to set the table for diplomacy and for us to bring people together across differences and find common ground. And that's how things get done. So I'm going to start off, if I may, by starting with you, Capricia. And I'm going to call her Capricia because she's my dear friend. She is the ambassador, and I have the highest level of respect for her, but I'm going to call her Capricia. And when Ambassador Soderberg comes on, I will refer to her as Nancy as well, if that's all right. All right, Capricia, you're up. You're going to tell us a little bit about all the steps that you have to go through, the schedule, the planning, what goes into planning a state visit. And would you also focus a little bit on what then First Lady Hillary Clinton's role was in that process? How involved was she? What kind of an interest did she take in putting these types of things together?
Well, thank you, Stephanie. First and foremost, I love being back in Little Rock. The moment that I land at the airport, it feels a bit like coming home, and get the wonderful opportunity to just spend so much time here over my many, many, many years. And so just lovely to be back here, and lovely to be back here at the Clinton Library. Putting together a state visit, this is the highest invitation that President Clinton could extend to another chief of state or head of government. The difference, of course, being that if it is a president or king or emperor, then they received a chief of state, a state visit. If it was a prime minister, they were the head of government, they received, of course, an official visit invitation. I will tell you that really the only difference between the two is chief of state gets 21 gun salute, head of government gets 19 gun salute, but the rest is the same. The rest is the same. But it was just magical. A lot of hard work, but really magical putting these events together. The president would determine who actually was going to be our special invitee. And once that was decided, it was like, go time. Hopefully, Stephanie, who was in charge of the schedule, gave me 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks in the planning process. It really did take just about that much time because there's so many elements that need to come together. We have to meet as a group to determine who are the guests. And I would reach out to every department in the White House. I would reach out to other agencies, the State Department, to determine who actually should receive the honor of receiving an invitation to this event. We then would discuss with the military office. What are those military movements? How are the cordons? What's the timing? How would guests arrive? How would the leaders arrive from the moment that they would touch down at Andrews Air Force Base? And we would be greeting them to the moment, of course, that they would depart. All of that was military precision, and they managed all of that with us. We discussed with the Secret Service all of the security implications. But the most fun, of course, was determining what's the style, what's the decor. And as Stephanie notes, Secretary Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, she has so many doggone titles, Senator Clinton, right? I mean,
First
this is
Lady
one
Clinton.
incredibly accomplished woman. But at the time, our First Lady, Mrs. Clinton, she would really sort of assist in setting the tone of that visit. She would sit in the office, and I kid you not, we would sit around and we would look at swatches of tablecloths. Then we would go and visit Nancy Clark in the florist shop. We had a fabulous florist, right? Nancy was just amazing. She had such style, but she really leaned into the style of every First Lady. And Hillary liked her, or excuse me, Mrs. Clinton, liked her centerpieces very loose and open. And she would even get in there and start pulling them apart and adding different flowers. And then where were they going to be hosted? Now, President Clinton is not one to have small events. He enjoyed having big. Everyone should come and experience this. And up until the last minute, he might be calling me in my office and saying, Capricia, can we add one more couple? I mean, two.
That was a
maybe
really
three.
good impression, Capricia. That was good.
And I'd be like, sir, I serve at the pleasure of the president. Of course we can. Then I'd go, oh my God, how are we going to do that? And trying to figure it out. But we very rarely had a state visit in the state dining room. They were either in the East Room or more often actually in a tent that was in the lower South grounds and sometimes on the South grounds itself, because he and she both really wanted everyone that they could possibly bring into this experience. But first and foremost in all the planning process was that they wanted to showcase the best of America to our visitor. They wanted American food with an American chef. That's why Hillary Clinton brought in Chef Walter Scheib. She wanted an American chef that was going to source great food from all across the United States. She wanted great American entertainment. And she wanted also the best of American guests that we could showcase to our visitor. Sometimes that was 140 guests, but more often than not, that was 350 guests that I would need to manage. But no matter what, the number of guests, where the location, the design, the decor, everything, I have to say that each and every one of those events that we put together, each and every one of these state visits, unique and of their own, and taking in consideration that we had to have parity because we couldn't treat one country better than we treated another country. So we kept them all quite similar in the execution of the events. Each and every one were elegant, welcoming, respectful, and achieved the ultimate goal of strengthening that bilateral relationship.
That was
For
great.
sure.
Thank you. Sharon, you had a very unique role in the White House. You literally were like a fly on the wall. You were there for everything. You heard everything. You saw everything. You photographed everything. Talk to us a little bit about first of all, how did you prepare for such an important role and job? And secondly, talk a little bit about your role in sort of the state official visits. What were you specifically looking to capture for both sides, really?
The spirit for both sides. because both sides were very
Here,
enthused
let's
about
put your mic up here a little bit.
both
dear.
sides were enthused about being there. And so was I. This is stuff I'm not watching on TV. I'm really there. I'm pinching myself going, I'm sure they made a mistake. I mean, I'm from Southeast DC. Do they know where I'm from? But they were very cool about it. And the good part was the people I got to work with me. I didn't have to yell at nobody. Can you imagine working a job and don't have to yell at nobody? Hello.
We were right next door to each other.
See? And it's so cool because sometimes I can hear you next door going, ah! I like what I hear. Ah! I mean, shit's going on.
Oh my God.
There is a beauty about how things evolve, not devolve, evolve. Everybody that worked on the photo staff understood everything we did was historical, and as I say now, historical. Because the bottom line is whatever we shot is going to live past all of us. And the other deal is if you want to be there, you got to have pictures that show you immersed in what you're doing. If you want to be a photographer, I don't know a better way to live a life than to work for good people. I've worked for plenty of lousy people in my time, and I'm glad I finally found heaven, okay? Because as hard as the military worked to make things work in the ceremonies, Secret Service worked double hard to make sure everybody was safe. The other deal, Stephanie couldn't go home. If things weren't all clear about who was going to do what and what time it was going to get done at, she did not leave. I would leave Stephanie. I could hear her next door at 11 p.m. When I came back in at 6 or 7 a.m., Stephanie's still there. Now, what does that say about my job? I had a better job, okay? I had a way better job. But we had a great staff, too, because the office manager, Marilyn Jacanen, had been through several administrations. So we weren't operating from scratch. And the deal was, if you listen to people who've been there before you, you know you've got the keys to the kingdom. And whatever you're trying to accomplish is going to be better because you're listening to somebody who knows. My mother and father always said, when in doubt, who did it before? Hey, we're not talking Christopher Columbus. We're talking leader of the free world trying to make everybody safe. And by doing that, if you do it right, the edge comes off the, what do you call them, bilateral meetings. Now, everybody's got assistants that don't feel the same way their leader is or what they're about. And we can see them whispering in ears and whispering in ears. And we're shooting all that stuff going, damn, this is not a party. This is a whole nother thing going on. So I was privileged to understand how government really worked. I took too much for granted when I was in junior high, high school, college. I really did. And you get there where people are serious what they're doing. Oh, it straightened up me. Hey, Sharon, you got a rock spine there. You better have it. Because if you don't have a spine, you can't stand too long. Because the bottom line is, things go on, and you have to decide when to move as a photographer because one, you don't want to disturb anybody's continence. You don't want to mess up the atmosphere that's going on as they get down to the serious nitty-gritty. I got to hear stuff I thought I'd never hear in my life, okay? So when you see stuff, hear stuff, and then the paper reports it a different way, I'm like, what's wrong with y'all? I was there. That didn't happen. What the hell? It just goes back to if you are present in anything you might consider historical, you really know what happened, and you can add your own 2 cents worth. That's why diaries are important. Poetry is important. Talking to your parents is important because they're going to remind you why you're there. You are there not to have fun. You are there to do some serious hard work as a photographer, and I thought photography was fun when I started. When I got through with the Clinton administration, I learned so much. I also learned that it was serious history and serious herstory because of the way we did things. We always had 2 people with him, no matter what he was doing, because you got to have the inside view, and then you got to look at it from afar so you can include the people around him that are also making all this stuff work. And I mean, not just work very, very, very well. Now, a government working very well. Oh, we did it. Oh, yes, we did. And if you had been there, you'd have been proud going, dang, they serious. You bet. It's good to be serious when it comes to diplomacy.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm looking for my colleagues because I can't see. I'm assuming, is Nancy not on the screen? Is Nancy with us? Is she with us? Oh, yay, Nancy, you're with us. We just can't see you, but oh wait, now we can see you. There you are. Nancy, welcome. Ambassador Soderberg, Nancy, was with the National Security Council. And Nancy, if you could tell us a little bit from where you sat on the National Security Council, kind of what you all did in support of the planning and execution of state visits. And then similar to Capricia talking about what the First Lady's role was and what kind of an interest she took, could you talk a little bit about President Clinton's role and how he was involved or not involved, or what his role was in helping to plan for these very, very important visits?
Absolutely. First of all, it's such an honor to be with you all and to see Sharon and Capricia again, and the incredible state dinners. And as Capricia said, once they've decided to have a state dinner, really the First Lady, the protocol, Capricia was very involved, decide the sort of pomp and circumstance that's so important with this. But the National Security Council gets involved very early on deciding who gets that coveted invitation. There's a lot of foreign policy decisions. Are you trying to promote trade and relations? Are you trying to promote a peace process? Are you trying to support democracy? Are you trying to just show a strong relationship like with our ally to the north, the Canadians, as President Clinton said? But once that's decided, then you get into the negotiations of what level, how many state dinners, how many official working dinners, how many just meetings with head of state. So it's a very calculated, tiered level of support, which, as Capricia said, is the most coveted invitation is an official state dinner. And there are not that many of them. So it's quite extraordinary. So there's a lot of background going on. But once the dinner once the official visit is set, the national security does all of the substance. What are the press statements going to be? What are the subjects going to be? You talk to the other teams on the visitors saying, we're going to have these issues. And then surprises happen where you just have to deal with them along the way. So we do manage the kind of international relations of it, but the bigger part is really the entire White House operation that comes together with the music, the food, the incredible desserts. Like when the Japanese were there, they had cherry blossom desserts that look like the cherry blossoms that the Japanese gave us around the tidal basin. So all these incredible nuances, and of course the gifts, and that's where the genius of the president's touch on the personal nature, what would really get to this person's soul in terms of a gift, and then the whole pomp and circumstance. So it's a whole team effort putting these things together.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to do a little bit of a follow-up. Talk a little bit about how you would brief the president to prepare for a state visit, and sort of all of the briefing, the protocol, all of the issues that you're dealing with, sort of the foreign policy objectives. Talk about that and maybe touch on sort of what his role was working with you all to plan for the visits.
Well, the first is who are you going to have first? So we would come to the president and the first lady with a recommendation on who we'd recommend. And Canada was important because it was one of our biggest neighbors. It often was ignored because it's a good neighbor and they behave really well and support us and everything. So we wanted to really make sure that they felt appreciated and for that important relationship. And the president also was very involved in the NAFTA discussions, so the trade agreement with Mexico, Canada, and the US, which was very politically controversial. And so all of the tiered recommendations, and then there's a lot of discussions with the State Department, and then of course the president himself decides on which ones. And then once you get into that, then the National Security Council spends months, State Department, our embassies abroad, months on what's the agenda going to be, what tier of visit are they going to get. And then when it actually happens, the State Department, the National Security, if it's a big trade mission, then the Secretary of Commerce would come, would be in the meetings. It's always a big fight of who actually gets to be in those meetings. and handle the substance of the press statements afterwards, which are always very tricky. Surprises happen in these meetings. Not everything that you expect to get, you get. Sometimes the other team will bring some unexpected things. So there's a last minute scramble. And my biggest memory is, what is the statement going to say? Because there's always these last minute edits right before the two presidents would walk out before the press. So it's really intensive behind the scenes. And then there's this wonderful time where you a very special moment where you can actually relax for an evening during a state dinner.
Thank you so much. All right, I have a question I'm going to ask all three of you, and I'm going to ask you, Capricia, first to talk to us a little bit about what the mood in the White House is like the day leading up to and the day of a state or official visit. What is the vibe?
Oh, well, we have, I'm just reminiscing, thinking in my head all the wonderful times that I shared with Nancy. I just have to add to what Nancy just said, is that I always sort of kind of felt sorry for the people briefing the president and Mrs. Clinton, because they came prepared with all of their notes, and they had these like little cards, and they were explaining every detail of every issue. And then President and Mrs. Clinton would just sort of geek out on them and say, well, Hillary, do you remember that, from 1822, the Treaty of blah, blah, blah. And then she'd go, oh, that's right, Bill. And then, if we talk about that, then you have to talk about the Treaty of blah, blah, blah. And these poor people briefing them would be like, okay, wait a minute. I can't keep up with those two brains, because it was like watching brain ping pong go on between the two of them. It was just amazing. So huge kudos to you, Nancy, and the team in having to prepare them. But the day of a state visit, for us, it would start at 5 a.m. We had a conference call, and it was with all of the entities, from the scheduling office to the military to the Secret Service. Anybody who was involved in this state visit was getting on that conference call, because we all had to determine, is there anything that we need to be aware of that day? And, we were concerned about protesters, and I'm so grateful for our wonderful constitutional right for us all to be able to voice our opinions, that we as Americans are free and we have this great privilege. But we were also very concerned that, we would have an event that would be executed well, but taking into consideration, of course, security concerns. In addition to that, wanting to make sure that the weather was going to be okay, because these events were held, the arrival ceremony was outside on the South grounds, and we certainly didn't want these leaders being rained upon. And for some reason, for President Clinton, it always was sunny. I mean, just like it never, ever rained. It was pretty amazing. And I worked in another administration for President Obama, and there was one time when it was pouring down rain. I mean, it was just pouring down rain on us. And of course, we had to call out some umbrella holders, and that was a whole other story that I could get into at another time. But we would make a rain call, we would make a weather call, we would make security calls, and then we would make a determination at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. It's a go. And then at that moment, everything started moving. We had thousands of visitors that had been lined up along the gate that were now going through security and brought onto the South grounds. Hundreds of students, children with little flags that were there, so excited to be a part of this historic time period. The military were lined up and they were coming in. The delegations were now moving from the Blair House, the president's guest house, across the street on Pennsylvania Avenue. They were now making their way to the South grounds and taking their positions on the toe marks. We were in the meantime greeting all of these guests. The interpreters were at their podiums. The photographers were checking their cameras and making sure. Hundreds of thousands of press on the risers in the lower South grounds were taking their positions. And then now it's 7:45. It's now 8:45. And the president and Mrs. Clinton would come down into the map room, first into the map room, and we would do a briefing with them. And we had on this big board some X's and O's, reminding them of where they needed to walk, what they needed to do. So giving them the brief, and they would look at us and they go, yeah, we got it. So we can move on. And then we would give word to our leaders that we're ready to receive them precisely at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., that motorcade made its way through the gates on the south grounds and would stop right in front of them and in front of the south portico. The chief of protocol, a position I was also very, very grateful to have held at a later time, would then make the introductions between the two leaders, and then starts the day.
It sounds very festive and exciting, but also a little bit stressful with making
Very
sure all the
stressful.
details. Sharon, from your purview where you sat, kind of what was your vibe? What was your mood that day?
It was cool. I had never, ever dreamt in my lifetime that one, I'd be at the White House. Two, I'm actually at a state arrival. What? And the other thing is that everybody really did their job. Nobody was fighting about who was supposed to do what and you didn't do it. You know, nobody's whispering in somebody's ear some nasty stuff. It's a team. It looks better than football and baseball, okay? Because everybody understands what's at stake. And that's peace in the world. That's a big deal. Peace in the world. I live for the day that comes, okay? So we could do it. And the fun part about being there is that everybody's nice, not mad about nothing that day. Nice, want to know where to go out that night after all this formal stuff is over. So the good part was each photographer's got at least 30 pounds of gear on them. And if it's in hot weather, we got 40 pounds with some sweat, okay? And by the time you get through the ceremony, we're like, you take a break because I see you just getting dehydrated. And I'm not dehydrated because I never get dehydrated. I drink plenty of water, okay? Water. And the other thing was that history's not going to forget this moment. And whatever happens here today, you know how we do. We go to a party and it's all good. Not always. But you go to the parties at the White House, you can't get mad. You can get mad if you want to, but you're not going to get mad in front of anybody because being polite and being nice carries way further than the mess, okay? So we all are on our best behavior. Their photographer is always with one of us so that they are not impeded from doing what they have to do for their folks too, because we're concentrating on our folks, but we want those golden moments where they're shaking hands and smiling. And sometimes you catch that somebody's not smiling. You got evidence they didn't smile. How do you know that? I shot it, okay? So the photographers are literally your walking visual folks. And not now, but later, it's going to be in books of history. It's going to be talked about just because look how that guy's looking at that guy. Look how that girl's looking at that guy. You know, how they look. All that stuff matters. And you have to remember what your parents told you. When you invite somebody to your house, be on your best behavior.
I also want to just say that I was always incredibly impressed with how Sharon did take under her wing the photographers of the foreign delegation because they're lost. When you go to the White House, it's the White House. They're like, I can't believe I'm here. And she would always say, come with me, because they could cut you out, right? Because you only want to get the shot, but you never did.
We're nice people.
You shared. She always brought them with her. She always made sure, and also made sure that they weren't wandering off where they shouldn't be wandering off to also, but just kept
and we gave them
handle
lunch.
on them.
Make sure they had lunch, okay?
You did.
If you eat, you're going to have a good time. And the other deal is we take them down to our offices, which were small, right next door to her office. And they were surprised how small our office was and how cordial we were with each other. Some other photographers hated each other at these other foreign delegations. Who knew? Until you see somebody cussing somebody out in a foreign language. I said, that sounded like a cuss out.
Nancy, can you tell us, is there ever a time that you remember where a visit was taking place and the script was literally thrown out the window and the visit took on a life of its own?
I would think that's almost every presidential visit with President Clinton. He would always pick up a phrase that he had a conversation with someone with the visiting. They would just be telling stories, and he would pick up on that story and weave it in there. I just have to pause for 1 second, though, and join Capricia in giving kudos to Sharon in that For those of us who were really junior at that period in the White House, we were all really young in the first term, and you just made a point of taking the most amazing pictures of us, which I have across my wall even today. So I'm so grateful for those great pictures that you made a point of making sure that everyone in that room got an incredible picture. So I'm so grateful for that. But these dinners they're very scripted. The toasts are usually written, but it's what happens among the conversations around the table. And President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton were the most engaging, as Capricia was saying. They just knew more than you realized, and they had a long history in international affairs. And so it would be with Nelson Mandela just talking about what it was like to be in prison, or how he had this incredible dignity of going through this 30 years of being in prison, and he wasn't bitter. And he would say things like, that was, I was there for a reason, and I was honored to be there for a reason, to fight for my country. And you just kind of melt, because you're just in the presence of a living saint. And I think the most powerful one was with Isaac Rabin and the South Lawn, when he was trying to get Yitzhak Rabin to shake hands with his enemy, and you could see the grimace on his face, and the president gently pushing them together at that signing ceremony on the South Lawn. And just the all-powerful role of the United States, when leaders around the world who are incredibly powerful in their own countries were in the presence of the president of the United States. And with the grace and wisdom of President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton, they just knew how to sort of make it easier for these leaders to do what we needed them to do, because they understood so much about the political situation they were in. And that was just magic to watch every time.
Nancy, could you also talk a little bit about, if there are any particular state visits, but how state visits strengthen diplomatic relations or fostered international cooperation? Are there any visits that you feel like specifically that those goals were really achieved in a powerful way?
Every state visit is designed for a purpose. Yes, it's incredible, and seeing the Rostropovich and Whitney Houston and the performers are, you never forget, but there's a real purpose to advance core interests of the United States. From the president mentioned Mulroney of Canada. It was because we wanted to solidify the new trade agreement as well as relations there with Yitzhak Rabin, give him the courage to make peace with his enemy. With the President Cardoso of Brazil, it was to try and solidify the relationship with this country that's almost as big as the United States, and very complicated trade and political relationship, and a leader of the trends of democracy in South America. With Nelson Mandela, it was to solidify democracy in South Africa after apartheid. He was reaching out to the whites in a way that was very controversial, having had a 30-year war really against the apartheid regime. And here he was reaching out, going to the soccer game, recognizing that he had to make a partnership with his former jailers. And time and again, coming into the White House with that high honor of a state visit is a huge boost to the visitors at home, and gave them more leverage to do what we wanted them to do. So every state visit advances U.S. interests in a way that is incredibly powerful. It's not the same as a meeting. It's not the same as us going there, but that coveted and rare visit is one of the most powerful tools that the U.S. has in its toolbox, and it really advances our interests every single time.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, now I want to ask some of the fun questions, and I may answer a few myself because I was there and had a lot of fun. Capricia, let's talk a little bit about the outfits, the clothes, what the secretary or the first lady would wear. Talk a little bit about what guests would wear, what the president would wear, what she would wear, and how did that come together? What was the process of choosing, and were there special things she looked to send signals with what she was wearing? Talk about that.
Well,
and what did you wear too? That was really important.
I tried, but these are black tie events. And so generally speaking, the president would wear a tuxedo, and the first lady was wearing a gown. Now, on occasion, there was specific intentionality. So we would, if there was a specific designer, like a Mexican-American designer, Mrs. Clinton always, always, always wore American designers. And so if there was we had the visit of President Jiang Zemin, and she wore, oh my gosh, thank you, Vera Wang was just on the tip of my tongue. Yes, so she sat with Vera and personally helped design the dress because she wanted to honor the heritage of Chinese Americans and to wear something that was specially designed by a Chinese American designer. There were sometimes certain colors that were chosen that perhaps would reflect the colors of that country or a mix of the two colors of the country. She was very good at that. If perchance they gave a piece of jewelry as a gift, like a brooch or a scarf, she would wear that evening to honor it, and then it would go back to the archives. So there was a lot of intentionality with the attire that they would wear. It was interesting, though, the one time that when Martha Stewart showed up in sort of this pink cropped pant outfit, and everyone made a very big deal about the fact that she wasn't wearing a gown. And it was Mrs. Clinton who said, "I think that she's elegantly attired. No one here is taking any offense. We love our Martha." And but it was quite interesting how people were a little taken aback by what she was wearing. But there was one time, I will never forget this, that I was with then First Lady Hillary Clinton. We had to go to New York, and this is before a visit with the Chilean president, and she was receiving a Grammy. And we show up at the Grammys, and she's wearing this beautiful gown. It had like a crop top. It was gold. I remember this so clearly, an olive skirt. And she was presented her Grammy. She gave her speech. And then we didn't even get to stay and enjoy the Grammys. We had to race off. We got on a plane, made our way back so that we could be there for the start of the visit. But that dress was worn on multiple occasions and had multiple purposes. But all a lot of fun. Now, I'm just going to give you one other little story that didn't happen in the Clinton administration, but it happened in the Obama administration when I was chief of protocol. I was wearing this fabulous Oscar de la Renta gown when I was chief of protocol. Now, my job was to walk out of the North Portico door, and I would lead the president and the first lady to take their place on the North Portico steps as we would wait for the motorcade to make its way up, and then the leaders would come out, and then I would hopefully graciously make the introduction. On this occasion, in my beautiful pink Oscar de la Renta gown with my very high, very skinny high heels, my Manolo Blahnik heels, I was being a bit vain that I had to wear these really high heels because I would lift my skirt, my dress, and I would make my way down the steps. On this occasion, my heel got stuck in a divot in the marble on the North Portico steps, and I fell.
And all the press were standing lined up.
All the press right there, right?
Yes.
And
Oh, no.
so thank goodness I do a little P90X at the time. So I just kind of jumped down. I stood back up, and the only thing I could think of is, please, God, let my dress be up still. Please, God, let my dress be up still. And then it didn't slide down. I looked up. I was like, okay, we're all okay here. The president reached out to me. Mrs. Obama reached out to me. She's like, are you okay? And meanwhile, all the press is flashing. She's like, stop taking that photograph. It was a horrific moment, but I have kept that dress so that I can remember it forever and ever. We got back into the house. The president looks at me and goes, girl, are you okay? And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. And this was, of course, for the president Calderon of Mexico. I'm half Mexican. My entire Mexican family is watching. They thought I just had a heart attack. It was crazy.
Google Capricia Marshall Mexican state visit, and you can watch it take place. Yes. You can do it right now on your phone, actually, if you'd like to.
Down. But that dress, those shoes, I'll keep them forever.
While we're on the fun subject, let's talk a little bit about the entertainment and how you chose, you've heard Whitney Houston, Lou Reed. Talk about how you would choose the performers that would perform at the state dinners, another very coveted type of invitation to an artist. How were they chosen?
Well, I was very lucky to be working for the president who just loved, adored, knew music better than anyone. So after we would have this meeting with our counterparts, the delegation of the foreign leader, and usually about 4 or 5 weeks in advance of the visit. And we would ask them, are there any preferences? Does he prefer this type of music, that type of music? They would give us all their preferences and also their dislikes, or if there are any allergies about anything like food and flowers, etc. So we downloaded as much information as we possibly could. And then we would bring it back to the president and he would be like, I'm thinking we should have, X, like for President Mandela, who did express an interest in Whitney Houston. That was someone he really wanted. President himself called Whitney Houston to say, we would like you to honor President Mandela on this very special occasion, which she did beautifully, elegantly. Although Bobby Brown was a bit difficult, she was fabulous. She was fabulous. And then for President Hubble, he had this very special connection with Lou Reed because of the Velvet Revolution and that he was a part of it. He helped inspire him when he was in prison, that his music kept him going. So it was very important for him to be there for this visit. And Mrs. Clinton assured that that would take place. As a matter of fact, for the rehearsal in the afternoon, we always rehearse the musical arrangements in the afternoon. We give them a moment. President Hubble and accompanied by Mrs. Clinton, they came and they watched the rehearsal. So during this rehearsal, the chandeliers in the Eastern were literally, because the sound was so loud, they were moving. They were just moving. So the curator in the White House is looking up in horror. Christine, you would have died. Jay, you would have been just like, oh my gosh, stop this. The White House usher and Hillary Clinton was looking at them, and she's looking at it, and she looks at me and looking at them. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got to talk to Lou Reed. So we finished with the rehearsal. Everyone's like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. They make their way up. I go, oh, so Mr. Reed, hey, so listen, the sound of the music was a little loud. So I think we need to bring it down so we don't harm the guests by the chandeliers falling and killing them. Can we just bring the volume down a little bit? He goes, are you asking me to change my art? Are you asking me to change my craft? Because if that's the case, I'm leaving and I'm calling President Hubble and I'm not doing this. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not. I don't know. What am I going to do? Kill people or let him have his art? I was trying in my mind to figure this out. Then he turns to me. I couldn't believe this. And he says, hey, by the way, you were really cool in inviting me and my wife to come to the dinner tonight. Can you also invite my bandmates? Can my bandmates come to the dinner? So I said, well, Mr. Reed, I've designed these tables for 10. Are you asking me to change my art? Are you asking me to add another seat? And he looks at me and goes, if I turn down the volume, I said, you get your seats. So we saved the White House chandeliers.
All right, I'm going to pick up a little bit on the Lou Reed performance and the Hubble State visit, because my lovely friend Capricia put my name on the invitation list with my fiance to come to this very exquisite, fabulous dinner. And the other thing that she didn't tell you is when they do the seating, oh my gosh, the seating for these changes up until like the last minute, but it's all very thought out. People get to sit next to people they have something in common with or interesting conversation. So my fiance, my husband now at the time, is a former hockey player. And so Yammer Yager was invited to this dinner. So Capricia sat Yammer Yager on one side of him and Paulina Portskova on the other side of him, which I wasn't quite sure why that was done. But he had a lovely time. And at my table, I was sitting with Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson. And on my left was Rick Ocasek from the Cars, which obviously he was married to Paulina at that time. So we had very fascinating conversation. However, after we were eating and they were getting ready to perform, they were all really fidgety and getting nervous. And finally, Lou Reed says to me, Stephanie, where can I go smoke a cigarette? I said, I'm sorry, this is a non-smoking campus. Nobody smokes here. Nobody who works here. He's like, I don't think you understand. I am not going to be able to perform if I don't have a cigarette. And I'm like, oh my God, Capricia is going to kill me. What am I going to do? So, and then Rick Ocasek says, if you're taking him out for a cigarette, I need to have one too. So anyway, I didn't tell Capricia, but I said, okay, guys, I'm going to go step at the door. Give me about, 20 seconds so it doesn't look obvious. And then I'll meet you at the top of the staircase. And so Rick Ocasek, Lori Anderson, Lou Reed all got up to go to the restroom and followed me. And I took them downstairs. We went out through the kitchen into sort of the area where the dumpsters are. And I let them smoke their cigarettes. I'm pretty sure they were cigarettes, just cigarettes. And I was getting so nervous because this was right before the dessert, right before the entertainment. I just knew Capricia was running around going, where have they gone? Where did she take them? So then we came back upstairs. I said, go wash your hands because you guys really smell like cigarettes. They're going to know and I'm going to get fired. So they all went, washed their hands, and then nobody knew anything differently. And then they performed and they did a great job. And the chandeliers were literally shaking. It was the most unbelievable. I don't think the East Room or the White House had ever seen anything like that before.
No.
It was pretty amazing.
And this is the first time I heard anything about smoking of the cigarettes.
I know.
We're going to have some words about this.
Anyway, that was a lot of fun. Thank you, Capricia. That was the invitation of a lifetime. And Secretary Clinton had on a fabulous St. John dress that I believe, Jay, isn't that up in the exhibit? The beautiful, it was one of the most fabulous things I think I ever remember her wearing to a state visit. So you got to go see that
And
gown.
there's a wonderful photograph that
Thank you,
someone
Sharon.
took of a sect of Hillary Clinton dancing with President Hubble. Is not the custom. Usually after the dessert, that they escort the leaders out through the South grounds, through the South portico, into the motorcade and on their way. But at this visit, they stayed and they danced with one another. And there is a fantastic photo that Sharon took of President Hubble swirling Hillary Clinton on the dance floor in this fantastic St. John outfit. And she's so tiny.
So beautiful. Nancy, tell us what your favorite or most memorable moment was from a diplomatic visit.
They're hard to pick, from hearing Rostropovich or pretending we're Princess Diana dancing with John Travolta on the floor, or those with the Marine band playing, and they're just extraordinary. But my all-time favorite was standing in the receiving line for the Emperor and Empress of Japan, which was a white tail event, which I think was certainly the first one I'd ever been to, but they're very rare. And I usually would get last minute invitations because they're really coveted. And then at the last minute, they needed a woman, or somehow there was room for me. And so I usually only had a couple hours to run out and buy a dress, come back. And I thought it'd be really fun you're supposed to wear long gloves, and I had never in my life worn long gloves. So I'm standing in the receiving line asking a friend of mine, what am I supposed to do with these gloves? And do you take them off? Do you keep them on? Do you eat with them? And I get this tap on my shoulder, and this woman behind me says, I got the white glove briefing. And I turn around and it's Oprah Winfrey. I could not believe it. And she said, you're supposed to keep them on during hors d'oeuvres, take them off at dinner. And then we chatted through the rest of the time. So that's my favorite story, is getting the white glove briefing from Oprah Winfrey.
Thanks, Nancy. Sharon, tell us about your favorite memory or something wild that happened at a state visit that you want to share with our audience here tonight that you were privy to.
Yeah, everybody thought Al Gore couldn't dance. I got evidence that man can dance. And he got style too. And if he had been seen more often on television, on the news doing a dance, they would have had the Al Gore, okay? And it would still live today. Because when folks who are kind of stiff loosen up, it's magic happening all the way live. And every time I saw Al out on the floor, I'm stalking him because I know it's going to be a great shot. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, Capricia, you had so many incredible memories. Talk about one or two of the most memorable state or official visits, and then maybe tell us another secret behind the scenes story like I just told.
Well, there really were just so many wonderful wonderful moments that happen. And then Sharon has captured, I mean, she just exquisitely, somehow or another, I was like, how did you get that? Like, where were you? I didn't even see you. She was so stealth, even though she was wearing a lot of camera equipment. And so it was always wonderful after the event to go through Sharon's photos, because then you saw everything else that had happened that you hadn't experienced. And then days after the event, you saw what Nancy was planning for, that the goal of this purposeful entertaining by the president and Mrs. Clinton, that it wasn't only about the pageantry and the diplomacy, et cetera, but they had these objectives that they wanted to achieve throughout their entertaining. But there were these fantastic moments. Like I talked about the dueling pianos between Elton John and Stevie Wonder. And after everybody had gone, Stevie Wonder stuck around, and he was playing in the grand foyer. Well, both of them, they were going back and forth between the two of them. And President Clinton has an exquisite voice, just a beautiful, beautiful voice. And he was singing along, and Prime Minister Blair was singing along, and Cherie Blair was singing along. And then Hillary started singing along. She could kill me. And everybody would just sort of stop and go, and as Sharon said, that there's the Al Gore, but then there was sort of the Hillary, and she was dancing and singing, but I loved it, like that she was just letting loose and singing and dancing, and in her own very phenomenally special way. So there were just those wonderful moments. There were also moments like, that we would have with other celebrities. I mean, literally, Bobby Brown was not going to sit down until he was given a seat right next to Whitney Houston. Now, it was our custom because we wanted to split couples up. We wanted them to experience other people. We wanted them to engage in conversations with other people. So we deliberately split couples up. And he was not going to sit. And poor Ann Stock, who was my predecessor as social secretary, a phenomenal, phenomenal person who I learned a great deal from, she just sort of sat there and explained to him why he was going to sit where he's going to sit. And he said, well, then nobody's going to sit and both of us are going to go home. So that moment we had to ask someone to get up from their seat and move and put him in their seat. It was just such a thing right in the middle of the dinner. All went off incredibly well thereafter. But, these are some of the things that we would have to deal with. We also I was sharing with these guys at one time, artists would refuse to sing because they would just get stage fright. And President Clinton was amazing. He would go in, he'd embrace them. Come on, it's okay. I'll sing with you. Let's go together. And somehow or another, he would get them to the stage where then they would begin to perform. But there was, one of the visits, and I think this is highlighted, Jay, I'm not quite sure actually, is that there was one visit that was incredibly important in the Clinton administration, and this was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization 50th anniversary. It was incredibly important for so many reasons. Purposeful entertainment, as Nancy pointed out, this was during the conflict in Kosovo, so we had our own men and women of the military over there fighting. We had to take great pains that we were being thoughtful, but also that we could still celebrate, punctuate this moment. And then we had all of these leaders. We had 48 heads of state at the White House at one time.
Security, oh my gosh.
Security was amazing. Languages, the interpreters, all of the movements. We were very, very lucky to have extraordinary military working with us, and the timing and the precision of each arrival. It had to be, I think it was, we had it down to 40 seconds, the arrival, the movement, the welcome, then movement upstairs. So we have all of this timed, and we have everything flowing beautifully, perfectly. And then comes the time for the leaders to make their way from the second floor to have their photograph with President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton and the head of NATO. And everyone's flowing and coming down the stairs, and the Office of Protocol is assisting us. This is Ambassador Mel French. She's doing a spectacular job. And then it stops, and we see no leaders. And we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. And of course, First Lady Hillary Clinton, I'm standing nearby. She looks at me. She's like, go check it out. So I go scampering up the steps, and there is Jacques Chirac. at the top of the steps, engaging everyone in a story all about himself. And so I'm like, how do you interrupt a leader? How do you say, excuse me, please stop talking and continue on with our evening? And so then I finally decided, do I want to go down without a leader and look at President and Mrs. Clinton? We're going to be like, or do I want to interrupt this leader? I thought, interrupt Jacques Chirac. So I walk up to him. I'm like, Mr. President, we are waiting. And he like, okay, I will make my way now. And finally, and I took him by the arm so I could assure that I was coming down with the leader. And then, of course, I let him advance onward so that when he got into the press shot, he was making his way. But, we have these moments. And as staff, we learn the evening must go on, diplomacy must take place. How do we continue to make things happen in the way that we hope that they were designed to happen and achieve the goal of their purposeful entertaining and showcasing the best of America?
I have one other story too, I could tell.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I don't know if you all remember, but there's still some sort of ashen part of the White House, kind of in the basement, where the British tried to burn down the White House in 1812. I don't know if you guys ever remember that, Sharon. I hope you got some pictures of it. But we used the St. Patrick's Day to promote peace in Northern Ireland, getting people together who were terrorists and who viewed each other as terrorists and sworn enemies, but they couldn't say no to a visit in the White House. And Jerry Adams in the early days came, and it was very difficult for his political opponents to join, but they couldn't say no to President Clinton. But early on, when he was at the White House, I remember someone suggested that we take him down to look at the burning part of the British parts in the White House. And the look on his face when he remembered that the British had actually tried to burn down the White House in 1812, I think made his political challenges a little easier. So that's my just a fun story. I'd forgotten about him. I'm listening to Capricia, remembering so many things.
Well, there's so many wonderful memories. This has been a real treat for me to be on the stage and to have you, Nancy, joining us as well, talking about some of these memories. And I encourage all of you to please go see the exhibit. You'll get to learn more about some of the stories we're talking about here. You'll get to see the beautiful photographs that Sharon took. There's wonderful video. I mean, it really is an exquisite exhibit. So I too want to thank Jay and all the staff at the Clinton Library, the Clinton Foundation, and just wanted to thank all of the panelists here. This has been a great conversation, and now I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Vicki Soto, the Dean of the Clinton School.
Evening by thanking the panelists for a thrilling conversation. And as a lifelong political nerd, this was so much fun. Capricia, you need an audiobook of just all of the anecdotes of this, in addition to the book that is out there and available. I also want to thank all of you for being our guests tonight here at the Clinton Presidential Center and for joining our community. We have a number of public events throughout the year, this being one of those incredible examples. The exhibit will be open tonight until 7 p.m. So I invite you to check out the exhibit as well as continue your evening at 42. Thank you all for coming.